So welcome back. Part of this is tense. Tense isn't always a bad thing. And the tension, for example, that you will often face between the strategy or the plan and the interruption is that you may be interrupted and there may be somebody waiting for you. So this tension between being spontaneous and being punctual, for example. In the military, it's all about punctuality and never mind anybody who gets in the way. And so we have to bear this tension in ministry. The skill, I think, is to know that that's what you're doing. It's to be conscious that that's what's happening, which is where meditation helps. To just to grow in development of consciousness, so that when things are happening to you, you're aware of them. And I'm frequently conflicted by this, to be honest. Sometimes I think punctuality is an overrated virtue until I'm the one who's waiting. So we do bear these tensions. What I generally feel in our society at this time, culturally, the ability to read interruptions is the thing. To go, okay. And this candidate was demonstrating to you that even in a moment of what would be for most of us stress, actually, she was recognising what we might call the sacrament of the present moment. That there was something in this incident that was about grace. And even just listening to you over lunchtime, you're all living in that world. It's amazing listening to what you do for people. So I'm very conscious I'm giving you a talk that probably, or offering a few inputs that you probably don't really need. But I feel sometimes I need reminding. So I mentioned my dad. Don't take your plans too seriously, right? Be careful of making your plans your why. Your plan is your how. There's something else about why that's nothing to do with strategy. And we minister to people who have often got their how and their why confused. I know this all sounds a little bit abstract, but once your how becomes your why, your list will bully you. That's generally what happens. The list takes over. Can I just, I want to, if you don't mind, it's my only papal quote. I'm reining the Catholic in me down. This is Pope Francis is one of his primary homilies. I read him a lot, so I know what he says often. Is about joy. And one of his primary homilies is that the Catholic Church is caught cold, basically, for quite a while now. And it's this revival of joy. He says, sometimes melancholic Christians faces have more in common with pickled peppers than the joy of having a beautiful life. If we keep this joy to ourselves, it will make us sick in the end. Our hearts will grow old and wrinkled and our faces will no longer transmit that great joy. I want to propose, and it's only a proposal, that when we are more attentive to the moment, one of the consequences is a revival of joy. And you'll find this in common literature, it's not just in theology. You find this in some of the great pieces. I want to give you a daft example. Have you ever left a job that you really loved? Sometimes we leave a job or a work or a ministry because maybe we've dried up, our passion's gone, maybe it's time. Occasionally in life, the interruption compels us to move at a time when it's going to cause sadness. We were chatting earlier, we left Ilkeston, mining town in the East Midlands, to move down to Exmouth. It absolutely broke our hearts. And we were driving all the way down the M5 going, why are we doing this? We've left people we love, We were both comfortable in jobs. What on earth are we doing? But we were. And on one such occasion, I came to leave a school that I'd really loved. I was the deputy head there. And I did something a bit sentimental. And I don't know whether this would be you, but after the kids had gone home, it was about 2 o'clock on a hot July day. The young people had all got in their buses early, and I went for a little walk around the school, and as daft as this sounds, found myself saying goodbye to it. Almost as if it was a thing. I was saying goodbye to classrooms. It's just bricks and mortar, right? But there was something in me that felt, I'm leaving a bit of me behind here. It was a spiritual thing. When I got back to my office, the caretaker, stroke site manager, had unscrewed my name off my office door. It was an interesting thing, that. And it's almost like when I arrived, you know, I stood there and I joked with him, because we got on, and just, you know, I said, you could have waited till I'd gone, you know, like, for the next person who's coming in. And we laughed about that. And I remember thinking it took me 8 years to get that office. It had a swivel chair. I was somebody. And in the teaching profession, once you've got a swivel chair, you're somebody. I've got my own swivel chair in my own office. As I was walking out of the school, it was the tradition that we'd all go home and then we'd all meet for drinks later. It was a lovely place. I really loved that place. There's a little drive and a place where the young people get on the school buses. I got to the lay-by and there was Martin. And Martin's quite interesting. You've probably all met Martin in your work and in your life. Martin was a sort of 14-year-old, socially awkward boy, a little bit dependent on adults, hung around the staff room a lot, didn't have great timing, a bit frayed around the edges, not abused but probably a bit neglected, and you had to work at liking him because he could be irritating. So you had to dig a bit deep, but it was the right thing to do. And it was often in those days, forgive me, in the early 90s, we could do this then, but I would often take him home because he'd miss his bus. And he was standing there, and I said, Martin, have you missed your bus again? I said, get in. And he said, no, sir. And then he said, it was quite interesting what he did, because he was awkward. He didn't really know what to do with his arms. And he's standing there a bit like this. And he said, Mr. Wells, and I realised he'd got a speech. Just by the buses. And his arms are sort of rigid, and his fists are clenched. And he said, Mr. Wells, I just wanted you to know that you was all right. That's it, that's the whole speech. There wasn't any more. But you know, I took him home. But those two little juxtapositions there have stayed with me, that the thing that's strangely eternal is Martin, because he takes me with him. And I realised, it's not one or the other in life, but we were saying earlier, and you reminded me of this, and thank you, was in terms of your office, you're gone in a day. Like within a month, that school was functioning perfectly without me. In fact, their results improved. It wasn't great for my ego. But I remember thinking, don't miss the point, to myself, don't miss the point. It was always about Martin. It was always about Martin. And the tragedy is that Martin is the bit you can't measure. If you live in a utilitarian environment that obsesses only on that which is measurable, you don't teach people the joy of the job. You teach them how to succeed, and it's not the same. Now, I'm not saying I can do this for anyone. I would love it if this afternoon you could just reflect a little bit on the moments in your ministry work which move you. Where you say, no, that's what I'm in this for. Because quite often, and this came up over lunch, they're microscopic. They're the brief encounters. We were talking about reflecting on the day. They're the brief encounters where you go, no, it wasn't for the office door that I was born. All the letters after my name. It was Martin, and I'm not being romantic when I say that. Because he takes me to his deathbed. And that story is also yours, in the sense that you just replace the names. You can replace the environment, but you can look back and you go, that relationship is no accident. God put me into the right space and the right time briefly, and that's my faith. I have to believe that. Otherwise, this is all rubbish. So I love the fact that people like you make yourselves available. Plan, write lists, and then prepare to be interrupted. That third bit is where the joy is, I think. Now, I would like you to challenge that in your own way. I go back to the saints, of course, because I just love some of their stories. I'm reading Therese of Avila, who's quite a hard read at the moment. I mean, a mystic. But my goodness, she had this way of earthing things. And, you know, after 6 years of contemplative isolation, comes out with a line, God save us from gloomy saints. You know, people who've learned to take themselves and the strategies so seriously that they start moaning to the world. And you go, oh, you know, and Pope Francis is saying to Catholics at the moment, like, two things. Firstly, cheer up. And secondly, tell your face. You know, because the second part is for your neighbour. There's no point cheering up inside. Like if it's just so, there's all sorts of authors from secular environments that would say the same thing. There's the consequence of focusing a little bit more on the incidental is that I think there's joy there. Therese of Lisieux, I love this. People say to me, oh, bloody hell, I've come to your talk now. I've got to do everything I have to do now, before, and now I've got to be cheerful as well. And you go, well, I think so. And if you don't think you can, maybe there's time for a little bit of discernment. You know, you might be just in the wrong place. I like her because, there's lots of reasons I like her, but this business of, please don't fall for the idea that you're not joyful. It's in there. You've got your joy, you just have to dig for it, because it's there. I think we tend to equate it with something we feel. You go, no, you go digging down, go in and you'll find that the joy is there. And I was taught this strangely. This is the last time I went shopping with my mum. And here we are in Marks and Spencer's on Cribbs Causeway. And we went in there and we spent about 350 quid on clothes for her that she never wore. It was quite interesting. But she became like a little girl again. My wife took her in the changing rooms and I was running all over the bloody shop but bringing outfits to her. She was swirling and looking in the mirror and, you know, it was absolutely gorgeous. It was one of my lasting memories of her. But in a strange moment, she did this beautiful thing. It's not expecting it. In the last couple of visits, we could go into a room. And on one occasion, I was busy talking to me. And she interrupted me as she was her wont. And she said, David. And I said, yes. She said, I don't want you to remember me like this. So I looked at her and I said to her, Mum, how would you like me to remember you? I don't know where that question came from because I've got my memories. But she did this thing. She threw her head back and closed her eyes. I thought she was going to come up with a line about a certain Christmas or a certain holiday, memory, family get-together, golden wedding. She didn't do any of it. She shut her eyes. I thought about you when I saw you this morning. She shut her eyes and she said, I'm in a yellow dress. It's gorgeous. She's still got her eyes closed. She's thinking of it, you see. And then she looked at me and she said, I'm with your dad. It's a sunny day. We're laughing. It's a blanket, a field. Remember me like that. Just remember me like that. She was actually painting a picture for me. What struck me truly about it wasn't the picture that mattered. What she was really saying, I think, was, Dave, I'm tired. I'm worn out, actually. But there's still that little girl in there. And she's still dancing. That's what she was saying to me. There's still a sunny day inside. And I can't seem to access that from strategies and plans. I can only access it from the incidentals. I'm in a yellow dress. It's a sunny day. I'm with your dad. We're laughing. So you see, she taught me quite a lot, really. I don't want your ministry, it's nothing to do with me, to lose its joy. Dance. You've got a dance inside you. And whilst I need a strategy and a plan to help me understand my life and the tasks that are set before me, in the end it's the dance. It's the dance. It's the incidentals. It's the moments of grace. And most of the people I meet in ministry who are enjoying themselves are still connected to that. Their own frivolity, their own nonsense, their own inclination to find joy. It's really hard, forgive me, I'm not including you, but when I work with Roman Catholic priests, they find this bit really hard. Just to tune into joy, and to dig that little bit deeper and go, in the end, it's not about being successful. It's about responding to the events of life. And sadly, I think so many people get caught up in all that. So what I want to ask you to do is to maybe use this last time we have this afternoon to capture the moments. When I was a younger dad, we were fortunate to be in Canada for a summer working over there. And this was an incident. My son there, Matthew, is now 26, but I got up out of bed earlier. It was this time of year, and it was very early, very daylight, and I couldn't sleep. I was jet lagged, and I paint, I draw, and I went outside and started painting and drawing, as you do. He got himself out of bed, realising I wasn't there, wanted to know where I was, saw what I was doing, went back into the little cabin, got himself dressed. Ali had packed him some art materials, and he came out and sat with me. Now, the thing that I want you to know that the picture doesn't communicate is he didn't say a word. He just came and sat with me. Yes, he's doing that. I'm ever so conscious of him. his mum sees this unfolding, gets out and she takes the picture. That's how we got the photo. But I hope this makes sense to you, because it's really hard to form this. But I remember sitting there, two things were going on in my mind at the time. The first was, the first was, my life will never get better than this. There's nothing. If I don't catch it now, I'll never see it. There's no ambition, qualification, vacation that's going to match this next few minutes. We're almost one. And the other thing which makes this real is I had to stop myself from telling him he was holding the pencil wrong. You see? It's both happening. It's not Disney. It's not Disney. I'm still his dad. It's still an opportunity to teach him a lesson. Just catch it while it happens. Oh my God. And I think a lot of Christian ministry has become too serious. It's got itself weighed down on how it's doing instead of tuning in to what it is. And I realised I could do that to being a dad. Oh my God. If you can do it to being a dad or a mum, you could do it to anything. Why do I keep hearing women saying to me, oh, so much better being a grandma? Because I've lost all the anxiety about doing everything right, and now I feed them sweets and we do stuff and we get dirty, and you go, do you know, like, it's funny, isn't it, how you can do that with ministry. And it's another favourite Pope Francis quote of mine, that if you over-polish the brass, you'll only see yourself. You know, if you make everything pristine, perfect, ordered and categorised, you'll bore everybody senseless. So, I know your ministries, even from the brief descriptions this morning, will be rich in texture and colour. They'll be tense and conflicted. There'll be compromise all over the place. But one of the things I'd ask you to do is to say, what does it mean to tune into or connect with the things that lift us? What are the grace-filled moments? Yeah, you see what just happened there? I keep saying to head teachers, they know this. If you feel like you're losing your virtue, you're tired, weary and cynical, go and sit in reception with the little ones. They'll spill paint on you and they'll remind you why you do this, all at the same time. So in your lives of ministry, there's been countless tiny miracles, moments of utter grace. And I'd just like to ask you to reflect a little bit on that, to reconsider where grace is. This is my son. I'm so grateful to the photographer. Got married last summer. This is my eldest. And the photographer caught the moment that he turns to the narthex and sees his wife. And I love the picture because I know him well. And there's this brief moment where there's nobody else. Just now for me, I'm just lucky to have seen them. The mistake would be to lose it. Just that capturing of what we might call the sacrament of the present moment was the utter fulfilment of everything that we are in the seconds that they happen, so that they become for us joy, really. So I'm going to send you with this gorgeous prayer, which I absolutely love. This is Thomas Merton, it's another hero of mine, Trappist monk, working out of Kentucky in the 1960s. My Lord God, I have no idea where I'm going. I don't see the road ahead of me. I cannot know for certain where it will end, nor do I really know myself. And the fact that I think I'm following your will does not mean that I'm actually doing so. But I believe that the desire to please you does, in fact, please you. And I hope that I'll never do anything apart from that desire, and I know that if I do this, you will lead me by the right road, though I may know nothing about it. Therefore, I will trust you always, though I may seem to be lost and in the shadow of death. I will not fear, for you're ever with me, and you'll never leave me to face my perils alone. What Merton seems to be suggesting here is don't put too much faith in your 5-year plan. So that's enough of me. A couple of questions for you. What are the moments of grace? Are you still able to draw joy from the incidental? And what's most struck you today?